Hello, welcome back. I'm Dr. Ihsan Garashadaki, clinical psychologist. This segment of the video will be a continuation of the video we created about what affairs are and what people need to do and figure out when they find out that there is possibly an affair going on or they're sure about it. This video today will be about what not to do. This is very important. If you haven't watched the other video, make sure that you watch the other one first to really get the point what we are talking about. And we kind of ended that other video on the fact that we will talk about kind of the first steps, as to when you find out or when you suspect there is an affair going on, what you need to do, what you have to start taking into action, more or less, what steps. Well, part of that, I would say, the first thing is to be aware of steps that can be detrimental and increase the probability that actually the relationship will go worse. That's very, very important because this can be very dangerous. Most people, out of their own literally ignorance about what affairs are and how they come to be and what the appropriate steps are, they immediately take the wrong actions, and by doing so they make the affair situation even worse than it is. So pay attention to the following. This is the first thing that you want to keep in mind in terms of a lot of times the affairs exist because of certain characteristics of the individuals and the way they interact with one another. So when you find out or suspect that affair is going on, you may actually intensify that characteristic, which means that then it will lead to more of the same behavior you don't like. It will lead to in fact almost like a justification and entitlement for your partner to feel more convinced that they actually should be pursuing what they have been pursuing. They have a certain right, or they're, again, like I mentioned, justified. They have good reasons, and you're giving them more reasons of those good reasons that they believe exist, why they should be seeking, or they are or would be seeking some kind of a satisfaction or gratification from a side relationship, and then that makes your job more difficult because then you're going to literally feel like without any good reasons, without any good evidence and secure understanding of what is happening, that maybe you're going crazy. Maybe you get confused even more about the whole relationship. Your doubts increase. Your insecurity deepens even further. So now let me give you an example. An affair may exist because one partner may feel that their other partner is a little bit too controlling or nosy in their financial affairs. So they may start kind of taking a little bit more control, like separating, withholding some information about the financial situation. Over the years, it may not work out. In the end, they feel that distance and gap between themselves, and in the meantime, they have established some kind of affinity with another person, which develops into a relationship and an affair. Now they end up with, let's say, a few months or a few years of this kind of dual relationship, and it all stemmed from that sense of control. Now, if you are the partner who does not have an affair but is being more or less cheated on, you discover or even suspect that maybe something is going on that you're not sure about, you may naturally gravitate toward immediately finding out, ascertaining whether or not an affair is going on. And you want evidence, you want some kind of a secure, signs and signals for you to be convinced, because certainly you're vacillating between a natural inclination to not believe any of these signs because you care about your relationship and you have a certain trust in your partner, but also the feeling of kind of being kept in the dark. There's certain pieces of the puzzle are missing, certain things, behaviors, sequences of behaviors or actions that don't make sense. So ultimately, our brain is smart, especially in pattern recognition, so it detects some deficiencies and inconsistencies. So you're torn between these two more or less beliefs or goals. Which one do you want to believe? And in order to get out of this imbalance, you naturally may gravitate toward securing more evidence. So, which is going to lead you to actually trying to control the situation even more, trying to control the conversation, where the conversation is headed, such as by, let's say, in order to find these inconsistencies, you may try to prove your partner wrong in their logic as they're explaining, like, let's say, what they did last weekend when they were out of town, something like that. Or you may, in fact, not rely so much on this verbal conversation and back and forth of almost evidence gathering, but you may kind of do it clandestinely on your own time. For instance, while your partner is not home, you may start kind of snooping around and looking at credit card receipts and statements and phone calls, histories and stuff like that, and trying to figure out, or even talk to other parties who are involved to corroborate whatever information is missing, such as what people may do. If the partner says, well, I'm hanging out with so and so, on Friday we are going over certain let's say whatever business matters and issues, you may somehow later on during your conversation, in a group setting or even by a direct call to that so and so partner, ask them whether or not this event took place and what the subject matter was. And now to you, this may be more of an innocent or benevolent or non-threatening approach toward, again, kind of making sure whether this is taking place or not, because maybe you really don't want to jump the gun, you don't want to accuse your partner immediately and kind of come across as interfering in their privacy. But if and when, and it does usually come out, that you have been looking at certain things kind of separately, independently, and the intention has been to more or less catch your partner red-handed, whether or not the intentions are good, whether or not the affair is happening, whether or not there is any justification to this action. Ultimately, the original dynamics that I mentioned earlier, those personality characteristics that had led to the inception of the affair, are now intensified. So the partner immediately is going to read these actions that you engage in a completely different, under a completely different light. So they are going to more or less feel justified by, literally subconsciously, I don't even think there is any malintention behind that, just kind of reading all your behavior as a repetitive kind of reiteration of that original need for control that they hated in this case. Now, every case is different. For another person, it may be a little bit different variations, such as rather than a need for control, it could be unavailability. Let's say if your partner entered into a kind of a affair relationship with somebody else, and that was linked to that original reason because they felt that you are unavailable, because the way you act and the way you talk and the way you um, reason about situations. And then now you end up again in your eagerness and suspicion to find out the details whether or not the affair exists, or even wanting to, you're sure of it, and then you just want to confront and prove that this is the fact. Then you may literally do it in that predictable pattern of uh, of, of unavailability. And what I mean by that is that you may simply kind of disconnect more from your partner, because now due to your suspicion you're even feel even more distant to the partner and feel betrayed. As a result, you may feel like, well, I just rather not deal with this directly, so I'm just gonna gather this information independently, not even bring it up, and figure out what I want to do with this down the road, or even hire a private investigator, etc. So all those inner reasons that are leading to you taking certain actions, they may fit into the same exact pattern that had spurred the affair in the first place in your partner, and they may perceive this even as, like I mentioned, a reinforcement of their first inclination and feelings that they are justified to continue that affair, to continue what they are doing. And if you haven't watched the other video, you need to watch that one, where we talked about those core feelings of them feeling invalidated, unappreciated, misunderstood, or not heard or understood or valued or supported. So it's even better reason for them to feel even more grounded and secure in their position, that there's a necessity for this affair. There's actual good reason to keep this type of outside relationship alive. So ultimately, people end up with some kind of an impasse. Now that impasse, it can take the shape and form of more or less just suspicion and accusations, and so very much ambiguous and vague assertions that something is or is not going on, or it's going to be an outright confrontational, intensely emotional, and almost like aggravated type of a conversation, many times ending up in a yelling match and the extreme unpleasant as well as unwanted but just overwhelming behaviors and actions. People literally just breaking down, psychologically, emotionally. They lose themselves in that moment when they kind of come to confront each other about a certain affair, because it is so jarring and it is so deep. The wound is so deep to a person's psyche, to their self-esteem, to their confidence, to their value, to their core beliefs about life, even their existence, or the meaning of life, or meaning of relationships. All of that is literally the manifestation of that existential terror that humanists talk about. And so ultimately, the idea here is, in terms of what not to do, is not to start snooping around, not to start trying to find more evidence. Do not start, going back behind your partner and trying to, prove something, prove them wrong, and prove your own logic and thoughts right by collecting evidence, putting these, pieces of the puzzle together, and even becoming more demanding and instigating in your conversations with them. This is a natural inclination people have. You should not do it. Now, I mentioned to you the reasons because they're guaranteed to lead to more strife and stress in your relationship. Now, you may ask in terms of um, um, whether or not, even spend the energy on ascertaining whether or not this affair is taking place. So you don't want to be in limbo. You don't want to live with this idea of uncertainty. That's one important notion that usually comes up, and we have a plan for that. And also, the other aspect to what you want to do is literally you don't want to live with that situation and affair and let it continue, so you want to put a stop to it. Sure, that is certainly a most desirable goal, and most people want to establish that. They don't want to just ignore the situation. So we will talk about those in a couple of other videos. We go in depth with each of these goals and ambitions that people have, and what really to do in this situation that would actually to lead not only to the improvement of a relationship, but also specifically taking you out of that uncertainty and setting a specific, tangible, achievable goal for that affair repair. Thank you for watching. Let us know what you think, and if you haven't done so, subscribe for more notifications.